Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Gopi Janna Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Brahmachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jamuna Tira Brahmachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Damodara Ki Jai Namo Vishnu Paraya Krishna Pasaya Bhutale Shrimate Divamita Swami Tamam Pachaya Purvaraksham Jabhakta Jai Bhagavata Bharata Radhakanam Yasya Namaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 29, talks between Narada and King Prachinabarhi. Text 23 to 25, I think. Pretty sure. If I'm wrong, someone please holler at me. Okay, 3 verses here, a lot to translate, bit of a purport. So please focus your ears on Srimad Bhagavatam sound vibration. Adhayo vyadhayastasya sainikaya vanascharaha puto pasarga shurayaha rajvaro dvivido jvara evam bahu vidayar dukhair daiva bhutatma sambhavai klishyamana shatam varsham dehe dehi tamo vritaha pranendriya manodharman atmanyadyasya nirgunaha shete kama lavandhyayan Mamaham iti karmakrit. Word for word translation, adayaha, disturbances of the mind. Yadayaha, disturbances of the body or diseases. Wow, so relevant. Tasya, of Yavaneshvara. Sainikaha, soldiers. Yavanaha, Yavanas. Charaha, followers. Bhuta, of living entities. Upasarga, at the time of distress. Ashu, very soon. Rayaha, very powerful. Prajvaraha, named Prajvara. Dvividaha, two kinds. Jvaraha, fever. Evam, thus. Bahuvidhai, of different varieties. Dukkahai, by tribulations. Daiva, by providence. Bhuta, by other living entities. Atma, by the body and mind. Sambhavahai, produced. Klishyamanaha, subjected to sufferings. Shatam, 100. Varsham, years. Dehe, in the body. Dehi, of the living entity. Tamaha vritaha, covered by material existence. Prana, of life. Indriya, of the senses. Manaha, of the mind. Dharman, characteristics. Atmani, unto the soul. Adhyasya, wrongfully attributing. Nirgunaha, although transcendental. Shete, lies down. Kama, of sense enjoyment. Lavan, on fragments. Dhyayan, meditating. Mama, mine. Aham, I. Iti, thus. Karmakrit, the actor. Karmakrit. The actor doesn't mean like some Hollywood actor. One who does the karma. It's interesting, it's the same root word, karma and krit. It's a karmakrit, the one who does the doing. So, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Prabhupada ki jai. Jai. The followers of Yavaneshvara, Yamaraj, are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajvara represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold. Typhoid and pneumonia. Wow. The living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to providence, to other living entities, and to his own body and mind. Despite all kinds of tribulations, the living entity, subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, and suffering from various types of diseases, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body. I might need to update this last line of Srimad Bhagavatam for this verse. Purport. In the Vedas, it is stated, Asangohyayam Purushaha. The living entity is actually separate from material existence, for the soul is not material. Wow. Do you feel the asanga, the separation from material existence? In Bhagavad Gita, it is also said that the living entity is the superior energy, and the material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and so on, are the inferior energy. The material elements are described as vina, or separated energy. When the internal or superior energy comes in contact with the external energy, it is subjected to many tribulations. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text number 14, the Lord says, Matrasparshasta konteya, shitoshna sukha dukkada. Because of the material body, the living entity is subjected to many tribulations brought about by air, water, fire, extreme heat, extreme cold, sunshine, excessive eating, unhealthy food, maladjustments of the three elements of the body, kapha, pitta, and vaya, and so on. The intestines, the throat, the brain, and the other parts of the body are affected by all kinds of diseases that are so powerful that they become sources of extreme suffering for the living entity. The living entity, however, is different from all these material elements. The two types of fever described in this verse can be explained in contemporary language as pneumonia and typhoid. When there is an extreme fever in the body, there's typhoid and pneumonia, and they are described as prajvara. There are also other miseries created by other living entities. The state exacts taxes. And there are also many thieves, rogues, and cheaters. Because most of them work for the state, so at least they've consolidated the miseries into one place. Miseries brought about by other living entities are called adhipotika. There are also miseries in the form of famine, pestilence, scarcity, war, earthquakes, and so on. These are caused by the demigods and other sources beyond our control. Actually, there are many enemies of the living entities, and these are all described to point out how miserable this material existence is. Knowing the basic misery of material existence, one should be induced to get out of the material clutches and return home, back to Godhead. Actually, the living entity is not at all happy in this material body. Because of the body, he suffers thirst and hunger and is influenced by the mind. Because of the body, he suffers thirst and hunger and is influenced by the mind, by words, by anger, by the belly, by the genitals, by the rectum, and so on. Manifold miseries encircle the transcendental living entity simply because he desires to satisfy his senses in this material world. If he simply withdraws from activities of sense gratification and applies his senses in the service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish. With the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be freed from all tribulations, and after giving up the body, he will go back home, back to Godhead. Wow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Let's first take a moment to glorify His divine grace, who's given us this incredible purport, which sounds brutal. Just misery, misery, misery. But someone's got to say the truth. Someone's got to tell the truth and not sugarcoat it. And that was Srila Prabhupada. He didn't have to sugarcoat it because the transcendental name, form, characteristics, and pastimes of Krishna are already transcendentally sweet like sugar candy. So Prabhupada didn't have to sugarcoat anything else. He wanted us to go for the real nectar, which is hearing and chanting about Krishna, and to not try to justify material existence in the slightest. And that's just so glorious. He's not trying to compromise with the material energy. Prabhupada did not make any amendments. He didn't make any amendments to our constitutional nature of being an eternal servant of Krishna, and that our happiness comes from contact with Krishna. Prabhupada did not have to adjust that, to alter in any way. And it's actually really glorious. We might read this purport and think, how is this spiritual ecstasy? It's all about like war and pestilence, typhoid, pneumonia, kapha, pitta, vayu, tribulations caused by extreme heat, extreme cold, sunshine. You can't even enjoy sunshine these days. You can't even enjoy the sunshine. If you live in Australia, where there's a hole in the ozone layer, you get skin cancer. You can't even go out in the sun. It's got like the most beautiful beaches in the world, but you're not allowed to go out there without being covered in SPF 1000 sunscreen. So it just seems this purport is just like full of suffering, but it's actually transcendental ecstasy, because Prabhupada is urging us towards the real pleasure, and he's not making any maladjustments or any compromise for the sake of this body and the things that this body is attached to. And that's actually amazing. Someone has to have the courage to say that. How many of us have a real friend who would tell you straight up when you're doing something really bad and tell you you're wrong? How many of us can count one real friend like that? Most of us probably not. In this age of quarrel, we're always trying to avoid any sort of conflict just because it's not worth it to us, you know? So even we see a good friend suffering in illusion, in ignorance, harming themselves, still we'll just, I don't want to upset them anymore. I won't say the truth. Srila Prabhupada is our best friend because he's telling us the truth here. This body is just full of suffering. You're hitched to suffering as long as you remain attached to this body. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Although I just said and, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so the real solution is just get over it. Just get over it, man. That's what we have to do. You got to just get over it. You know, like someone has gone through a terrible breakup and they're just ruined and they're depressed and they're sad and they're just whining and complaining all the time. At some point you say, just get over it. Just get over it and move on. So similarly with this body, just get over it. Stop expecting some sort of peace and satisfaction with your body tied to the whipping post. That's a very extreme example. Yes, we are tied to the whipping post. Did you know, by the way, that there's an estimated 27 to 50 million slaves in the world right now? There's actually more slaves now than there's ever been in history. You know, we like to think like, oh, slavery's over. No, there isn't. Especially in Asia, Southeast Asia, especially in India. There's still millions and millions of slaves who are actually literally tied to whipping posts. So, yeah, the body is not that great. This material existence is not that great. What did Prabhupada say here? There's misery. So basically, there's three types of miseries, three different categories. And you can just, you know, just like Krishna says that the three modes of material nature are always competing for dominance. Similarly, the three types of miseries are in a competition to put us in our place. So there's the adhyatmika klesha. Klesha means misery. Remind me to say a really awesome, super sweet verse about klesha, about misery, after all this is over. It's actually an ecstatic verse. It's awesome. But anyway, there's three types of misery. Adhyatmika klesha. Misery is caused by your own body and mind, right? Those we're very familiar with. Right now, actually, my back is just killing me. I don't know what I did. It's just like, at some point, you hit a certain age, and you might think, oh, yes, you're only 36. No, I think it starts at 30. I mean, in Kali Yuga, our bodies are getting weaker and weaker every day. So you hit a certain age where you just sleep wrong, and you wake up just in misery for days. So I'm going through that adhyatmika klesha right now. I got all my pills here. Misery is caused by the mind, right? We're in constant illusion, making mountains out of molehills. There's the 6 enemies of the mind: lust, anger, envy, greed, madness, and illusion. It is causing so much misery to you all the time. And so much so that the biggest pain relief is simply distraction. People pay a lot of money just for distraction. We need to have it streamed into our eyeballs and straight to the brain 24 hours a day. There cannot be enough mindless distraction because the miseries of the mind are persistent. You can't even escape them in sleep. So that's adhyatmika klesha, miseries pertaining to the body and the mind. And then there's adhibhautika klesha, miseries caused by other living entities. Bhuta. Bhuta means other people or bodies. Could be humans. I mean, it's mostly humans. But there's also the mosquitoes and your intestinal flora and whatever little insects are outside your window screaming all night while you're trying to sleep, or those peacocks that like to come up to my car and see their own reflection and then attack themselves and scratch up my car or whatever. It's just so many living entities causing all sorts of suffering for you. Of course, mostly caused by other humans. Prabhupada says here, there are other miseries created by other living entities. The state exacts taxes, and there are also many thieves, rogues, and cheaters. This is miseries caused by other living entities, or war. It's interesting, Prabhupada put war in the category of adidaivika klesha, the 3rd type of misery caused by demigods, the daivas. Its power is way beyond our control. But Prabhupada put war in that. He put famine, pestilence, scarcity, war, earthquakes, and so on. These are caused by the demigods or other sources beyond our control. So maybe it's not exclusively adidaivika klesha, because war is caused by human greed and malice. Famine, also caused by human greed. It is not a strange coincidence that there's simultaneously 1 billion people in this world who are malnourished, undernourished, and 1 billion people who are overweight. It's just, as Prabhupada would say so many times, mismanagement of resources. So this is caused by adhibhautika, other living entities, mismanagement of resources. The state is exacting taxes. And what are they doing with these taxes? Buying hookers and drugs. So there's no shortage of misery. Prabhupada says, actually, there are many enemies of the living entities. And these are all described to point out how miserable this material existence is. Isn't it curious that we have to be reminded how miserable this material existence is? That is the power of tamaguna. That's the power of the mode of ignorance, that even though we suffer, it's just like we can forget it a second later. We might think, well, does that mean that we really suffered? If we're suffering so much, but somehow we can just forget it. Yes, because the suffering is caused by the forgetfulness. They are bedfellows. Is that the right term? Strange bedfellow. Anyway, the suffering is caused by the forgetfulness. The forgetfulness of our spiritual nature and our relationship with Krishna. So they go hand in hand. And it's just remarkable that we have to be reminded how miserable our material existence is, because we will make so much compromise. We'll make so much justification to say, well, yeah, but, I got this thing recently. I had this little sensation, this little thrill. It was worthy of being posted on social media. So I guess it's not all bad. It's only 99.99% bad, right? And then you find some other people who are just like, yeah. I also had that one fleeting moment where I wasn't, in complete suffering. I also had this little sensation. I also had this great distraction. And then we kind of like share it around and try to get other people to get on board with it, justify it for us. But actually our existence in material nature is very miserable. And Prabhupada's reminding us, like, just because you had some little distraction doesn't mean that the war, the famine, the pestilence, the typhoid and the pneumonia, the adibhatika klesh, the adhyatmika klesh, and the adidhavika klesh isn't going on all the time. It's just we're in illusion. We're in illusion, and we're so ignorant that we try to justify it in so many ways. It's quite pathetic. We can do a lot better. I mean, that's really what Prabhupada's getting at here. We can do a lot better. We don't have to just justify so many suffering conditions and in that way maintain attachment to the body. Just recognize it is a lost cause. This body, you're never, ever going to get what you hope from it. You're not going to get the happiness, only the hopiness. Apparently, that was Srila Prabhupada's pun. If someone can find that in writing somewhere, I would be so grateful. Because apparently he said, in this material world, there's no happiness, only hopiness. And if Prabhupada did actually say that, and if I can see the evidence, I will just be double surrendered to his divine grace's lotus feet, because everybody loves a good pun. Where Prabhupada can make a pun out of even the most intensely valuable, unpalatable, but necessary spiritual truths. Like, in this world, there is no happiness, only happiness. His divine grace is incredible. But it's not all bad. Prabhupada says here, knowing the basic misery of material existence, one should be induced to get out of the material clutches and return home back to Godhead. So are we feeling the inducement? That's the whole point. That's the point of this purport. We should feel induced to get out of the material clutches and return home back to Godhead. The material miseries aren't supposed to induce us to find some alternative. Well, I wasn't happy with this circumstance in this situation at that place, but if I change to another circumstance with different situations in some faraway place, then maybe I'll really have the happiness. No, we're meant to be induced to get out of the material clutches and return home back to Godhead. That's the whole point. An intelligent person, when suffering, is induced to go back home, back to Godhead. Everybody suffers. And it's not necessarily the case that you learn from your suffering, because everybody's suffering and most people aren't learning. But those of us who have a foundation of spiritual knowledge, having heard from Srila Prabhupada in his books, our suffering is beneficial. Our suffering induces us to return home back to Godhead. Therefore, we should see it as a type of mercy. Right? What does Lord Brahma say? What does he say? Somebody help me out. Sadhaya Bhak.
Tate anukampa sushumikshmano
Thank you. Thank you.
Want me to say the whole verse? No, right, Prabhu?
No, I didn't hear you say the first line. I have to hear the first line, then I remember the rest.
Tate anukampa
Tatenukampam, thank you. Premikishwara Mataji.
sushumikshmano
Tatenukampam susamikshmano bhunjana evatma kritam vipakam ridvagvaporbir vidadan namaste jivetiyo mukti pade sadhaya bhak. That's what Brahma says. That the suffering can actually be beneficial for the devotees, because we have the foundation of transcendental knowledge, having received it from his divine grace. And therefore, one who can utilize that knowledge, who can employ that knowledge as a means of spiritual progress, becomes You could even say entitled to go back home, back to God. This is what Brahma is inducing us to do. Tatenu kampam susamikshmanu punjan evatma kritam vipakam. Just whatever it is that you may have to endure with this body and with this mind, the adhyatmika klesh, the adhibhautika klesh, the adhidaivika klesh, whatever it is, tolerate, endure, but hridvag vapurbir vidadan namaste, but always with your heart, with your words, with your body, offer respect and service to the Supreme Lord. Then we go back home, back to Godhead. That's our program. That's our solution to this problem of material existence. Not to try to make some little slice of comfort for our body and mind. It's so futile. Better to just tolerate and instead engage the body, the mind, the words in service to the Supreme Lord. Hrid Vag Vapu. And then we are induced back home, back to Godhead. So it's not all bad. Prabhupada's purport actually ends on a sweet note. One should be induced to go back home, back to Godhead, with the advancement of Krishna consciousness. What does he say? If he simply withdraws from activities of sense gratification, this is the sweetness of Prabhupada's purports. He lists like all this terrible stuff. Then he says, if we simply withdraw from the activities of sense gratification and apply our senses in the service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish. Immediately. With the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be freed from all tribulations. And after giving up the body, he will go back home, back to Godhead. Isn't that so nice? We've all had that experience, at least a little bit. We should hold on to that experience. Like just the other day, I was playing Mridanga in Kirtan. Bhubrit Prabhu was leading Kirtan. He comes up to the Bhakti Yoga Center every Thursday. Such a wonderful devotee. Been doing Sankirtan in State College for like 30 years, or maybe longer. I don't even know how long. But Bhubrit Prabhu never quits. And so he comes up on Thursdays and he leads Kirtan at the Bhakti Yoga Center. We had a lot of nice young people there. And we got this, it's like a totally new group because so many of our regulars graduated last semester. So we're kind of like starting fresh. But this new group, they sing like intensely, loudly, with enthusiasm. And so we're having a really loud rocking Kirtan. And I was playing the Mridanga for Bhubrit Prabhu was leading the Kirtan. And I was in a lot of pain, actually, because my back is just killing me. And I've had this whole like neck thing going on for so long. You know, the list of tribulations just like increases and increases. But I was in the Kirtan and I was singing along and I was watching everybody singing in ecstasy, playing this Mridanga. And I just totally forgot about all of the suffering of this body. It immediately diminished. This is what Prabhupada's saying here. If we simply withdraw from activities of sense gratification and apply our senses in the service of the Lord, then all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish. This is not hyperbole. Hyperbole. Hyperbole or hyperbole? I don't think anybody knows how to pronounce it correctly. This is not hyperbole. This is not just some bombastication from Srila Prabhupada. This is absolutely the truth. We withdraw from the activities of sense gratification and apply our senses in service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish. The problem is just that we can do that for a moment, but we're so conditioned to like, as soon as the kirtan is over, or as soon as the ecstatic service is over, we just snap right back into our materially conditioned state of mind. But we need to hold that Krishna consciousness all the time. That's one of the stages in the progress of meditation. Dharana. Dharana means holding, right? What is it? Shraddha, sadhusanga, bhajana kriya, nishta. Wow, I can't remember all the stages. Anyway, then that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Ashtanga yoga. What is the Ashtanga yoga? Oh, my back hurts when I laugh. Krishna Chaitanya. So dharana means to hold on. Dhyana, dharana, and samadhi. So, as we're progressing in our meditation, sometimes we can have that focus on Krishna's pleasure. We have that intense focus in Krishna consciousness, such that the material miseries immediately diminish. But the problem is we lose it. The kirtan ends, or the ecstatic service ends, the ecstatic hearing and chanting and the association of devotees ends, and then we kind of snap right back into our conditioned life. But as we practice, as we perform our sadhana bhakti, we make a habit out of practicing hearing and chanting, practicing regulated devotional service, gradually we become strong enough that we can hold on to that state, dharana. Then it's not immediate diminishment, it's complete diminishment of all the suffering of material existence. That's what Prabhupada says here. With the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be freed from all tribulations. And after giving up the body, he will go back home, back to Godhead. Do you believe this, dear devotees? Or is this just some sort of nicety Prabhupada puts into the purports just to kind of encourage us to keep laboring for his institutional expansion? Or do you believe it? Prabhupada is giving us the solution to all of the problems of material existence. Do we have the courage to apply it in faith? That yes, there's the suffering of my body, my mind, suffering caused by other people, suffering caused by the demigods, but the solution is not to buy more crap. The solution is to engage my senses in service to Krishna 24 hours a day. Do we believe it? I'm asking you, Prabhus. Because it's time. It's time to get serious about devotional service. I don't know if I can speak for all of you, but I can certainly speak for myself. I've been tiptoeing around the subject for almost 2 decades, and it's time to get serious, applying the senses in the service of the Lord as the real solution to the problems of material existence, and not just buying more stuff or combating with other living entities or fighting for some recognition, desperately looking for some validation from strangers on the internet. The real solution is to engage the senses in the service of the master of the senses, Sri Krishna. With the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be freed from all tribulations, and after giving up the body, he will go back home, back to Godhead. What is that ecstatic verse I wanted to say? Ashesha sanklesha samam vidate. I'm sorry I recycle verses like practically every Saturday, reciting the same verses. I feel like I go through them all the time, but they're just so sweet. I could do it every day. So bear with me. Ashesha sanklesha samam vidate. We're talking about klesha, right? All the different types of miseries. Imagine sanklesha. We know the prefix sang. There's kirtan, right? And sankirtan. The prefix sang means like completely, big, huge. Actually, I was just talking about it with somebody. Who wants to hear a dictionary definition of sang? As a prefix to verbs and verbal derivatives, it means with, together, intensifies the meaning of the simple root. Very, quite, greatly, thoroughly, very much. It also expresses completeness, perfection, or beauty. So therefore we say sankirtan. But in this verse, I'm quoting Ashesha sanklesha. So you have to ask yourself, what am I going to do today? What's on the agenda for today? Whip out your diary, 9 o'clock, breakfast, 10 o'clock, whatever, 11 o'clock. Is it sankirtana or is it sanklesha? You get to choose each day. Sanklesha means completely miserable, totally miserable. Ashesha sanklesha, and ashesha means unlimited. Unlimited, totally miserable conditions. That's what this verse is about that I'm about to recite for you. Unlimited, totally miserable conditions can easily become mitigated, samam vidate, simply by hearing and chanting about the Lord. Ashesha sanklesha samam vidate guna anuvada shravanam murare. Right? If we hear about the guna, the qualities, guna anuvada, the qualities and everything else. Guna anuvada shravanam murare. We know shravana means to hear. Murari, Krishna, the enemy of the Mura demon. Ashesha sanklesha samam vidate gunanuvada shravanam murare. That the unlimited, completely miserable conditions become samam vidate, just totally neutralized. Like when there's an acidic reaction causing the dissolving of your skin. You know, if you work in some really intense factories, there's some dangerous chemicals around. Sometimes you can get these chemicals on your skin, which will just melt it. It will go straight to the bone. And oftentimes water can make it even worse. It'll just spread the chemicals everywhere. You need a certain type of chemical to neutralize the thing which is causing the dissolving, the dissolution. So similarly, this material existence is like this extremely corrosive place. And you don't neutralize it with some water. You don't neutralize it with just some other, with any other chemical. There's one particular chemical which can neutralize that terrible, corrosive chemical that we're immersed in right now. So similarly, there's one thing that neutralizes the ashesha sanklesha, the unlimited, completely miserable conditions of material existence, and that is shravana murare. That is the appropriate solution. You put the wrong stuff on there, thinking this will solve the problem, it'll just make it worse. Just like if you have a terrible chemical burn and you apply water thinking it'll just wash off, you'll actually spread it around and make it worse. So the real solution to neutralizing the suffering of material existence is the Shravanam Murari. Krishna Murari, Shri Krishna Murari, Shri Krishna Murari. Remember when that album came out? That was just so awesome. I was still a brahmachari. I was in Australia. I remember that album was so awesome that we started to feel guilty, like we were brahmacharis and maybe we were enjoying our senses too much by listening to this kirtan album. It was that good. Love it. All glory to the Gauravani Prabhu and all the other devotees who made that incredible kirtan music. So Shravana Murari is the solution. Kimba punastach charanarvindam. Is that the verse? Ashesha sanklesha samam vidate gunanavada shravanam murare. Yeah. Kimba punastach charanarvindam paraga seva ratir atmalabdha. It's Vidura speaking, this verse, if I recall correctly. He says, unlimited miserable conditions easily mitigated, neutralized simply by hearing and chanting about the qualities of Murari, Krishna. And what to speak of those who actually have a taste for serving the flavorful dust of his lotus feet. What an incredible verse, huh? There's flavorful dust, paraga. Punastach charananav in the paraga seva, ratir, yes, paraga seva. There's flavorful dust in the service of his lotus feet. So for someone who actually has a taste for doing devotional service, then easily all the problems of material existence immediately diminish. That's really what we got to get into. And that's the opportunity we have at Gitanagari, by the way, for all the ashramites, those glorious devotees who are working tirelessly. I'm just kidding. I know you're all tired, but working tirelessly to serve Sri Sri Radha Damodar's enterprises at Gitanagari. You have such a wonderful opportunity to just be fully absorbed in seva as much as possible. Now, we might not be able to do 24 hours a day like Haridas Thakur or Rupa Goswami or some of these incredible transcendental entities, but you have opportunity for unlimited devotional service as much as you want. As much as you want, it's there and it's available. That's the privilege of being in the ashram. The opulence of being in the ashram is that you don't have to spend time, at least not much time, just facilitating or perpetuating your body. Because, when you're grihastha, there's like a lot of time and energy it takes to just kind of keep your body going. You got to maintain the roof over your head. and the food, and there's just like a lot of stuff. And if you have the kids, pick a direction for how you're raising them, and you have to debate that with your partner, and all this just takes a lot of time and energy. Meanwhile, those who are in the ashram can just be fully absorbed in hearing and chanting about Krishna, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, doing devotional service. That's the opulence of ashram life. To get as much as you want. And so I encourage you, please get as much as you can. I know you feel tired. Sometimes there's a lot going on. But when I was in the ashram, I didn't skip a single thing. I'm not trying to brag here, but really just trying to encourage you. I never missed a single morning program when I was in the ashram. Even when I was sick, I would often get pneumonia, actually, because we had this really terrible physical building in South Auckland. And in New Zealand, for whatever reason, people just don't believe in insulation in houses. There's no insulation whatsoever. So in the winter, it's like super humid and cold, and everybody be wrapped up in like 50 blankets. And I just have these terrible lung conditions, always prone to bronchitis and stuff. And so I'd have actual pneumonia. But still, every single morning, I'd be at the morning program. I'd never miss anything, always hearing and chanting, always trying to do as much devotional service as possible. So that's the opulence of being in the ashram. Paraga seva ratir atma labdha. Be greedy for it. Just get as much as you can, because later you probably won't be in the ashram forever. And later you'll be thinking, wow, when you're grihastha, it's like a privilege to be able to do some intense devotional service once a week. That's a privilege. So right now you're privileged to have as much as you want. Please take advantage of it. Anyway, let me just wrap up on that verse. Ashesha sankalesha samam vidata. Unlimited, completely miserable conditions are neutralized by hearing and chanting the qualities of Murari, Krishna. And what to speak of for those who actually have a taste for serving the flavorful dust of his lotus feet. In conclusion, this material existence is very miserable. Okay? Let's not sugarcoat it. Give up your rose-colored glasses about material existence just because right now in this part of America, there isn't war. It doesn't mean that we are not going to suffer a lot. It doesn't mean that war couldn't immediately happen tomorrow. This material existence is not a place for a gentleman. It is completely miserable. And we don't need to compromise with it. As Prabhupada's saying in this very sweet purport. Might be hard for us to appreciate the sweetness, but the sweetness is there. As Prabhupada's saying here, the whole purpose of the miseries of material existence is to induce us to get out of the clutches of material energy and go back home, back to Godhead. When we withdraw from the activities of sense gratification and apply our senses in the service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence are immediately diminished. And with the advancement of Krishna consciousness, we'll be freed from all tribulations. And after giving up the body, go back home, back to Godhead. I'll finish with one quote from the Thakur, Bhaktivinoda. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in his Harinam Chintamani, this material nature has nothing more superior to offer than the holy name. The holy name is the most precious treasure in the Lord's storehouse. The jiva and the holy name are the only two supramundane objects in the material universe. Everything else is inert matter. So let us keep that perspective. There are only two supramundane objects in the material universe. That is the jiva and the holy name. Everything else is inert matter. So there's nothing more superior that can be offered in this material world than the holy name of Krishna. There's nothing else. So let us take shelter of the holy name of Lord Krishna by chanting japa with affection. Evam vratas vapriya nama kirtyam. We should chant with a vow, with a vrata, and with affection. That name that is very dear to us, Svapriya Nama. And let us take seriously the opportunities, scarce they may be, to chant in the association of other devotees. That's the thing that really unites us. We're all individual. We're all so different. We even have different ways of serving Lord Krishna. Even sometimes we disagree about how to serve Lord Krishna. That's fine, whatever. But there's one thing we can all agree upon, and that's chanting the holy names together. So any opportunity that's there, we must take it. This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is urging us to do. This is what Srila Prabhupada is inducing us to do. There's nothing worthwhile in this material world. There's nothing worthwhile. The holy name of Krishna and the Jiva are the only supramundane objects, the most valuable treasure in the Lord's storehouse. Let us make that our shelter. Let us make that our sense gratification. Our transcendental spiritual sense gratification should come from the kirtan of the devotees and not any compromise with the material existence. Okay, I'd like to finish there and ask if anybody would like to add anything. Oh, so much pain. Krishna, I deserve it though. Ask if anyone would like to add anything or correct me in any way, or even ask a question. Jagannath Pandit Prabhu says, which verse is that? I'm sorry, which verse are you referring to, Prabhu? I quoted a couple of verses. Is it the Ashesha Sanklesha verse? Because I don't remember. The last one. Evam Vratasvapriya Nama Kirtya. About one who chants the holy name with a vow, that name that is very dear. They experience all the ecstatic symptoms. Jatana Rago, Jutta Chitta Uchai, Hasatito Roditi. I'll have to look it up. It was originally spoken by Narada Muni to Yudhishthira, but then Lord Chaitanya also quoted it to Prakashananda Saraswati and his ilk. Such a nice verse about chanting the holy names with a vow. It gives reference to japa. That's why I really like that verse, because sometimes we struggle with japa. But Narada Muni is saying that one who chants the holy name with a vow, evam vrata svapriya nama kirtya, then all the ecstatic symptoms awaken. Chatan rago druta chitta uchai hasatyatoro titirauti gayati unmadavan rititi lokabhaya. One starts to experience, one laughs and cries and rolls on the ground and dances without care, dances like a madman without care for lokabhaya, without any fear of public opinion. That's how we're meant to dance in the kirtan. I don't care what everybody thinks about how I'm moving this body. I just dance in pure love of God. So that's actually awakens from vrata kirtan, vrata chanting with a vow. So that refers to japa as well. Oh, the verse about supramundane. Well, it's not actually a verse. It comes from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Harinam Chintamani. I'll just recite it again. I guess I could just send you the text if you like. This material nature has nothing more superior to offer than the holy name. The holy name is the most precious treasure in the Lord's storehouse. The jiva and the holy name are the only two supramundane objects in the material universe. Everything else is inert matter. Hare Krishna. Any other thoughts, comments, additions, subtractions, multiplications, divisions? No? Okay. Then
Hare Krishna.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Leela Kishore Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. What a wonderful class. I just wanted to comment on how it was very enlivening to hear about the kirtan with the young people. And when you were saying it, I was thinking how those same young people, if there weren't devotees there in contact with them, probably would be somewhere listening to some kind of music, maybe singing something. And then in that process, looking for the next distraction, maybe a drink, and then the next distraction, maybe a girl or a boy. And because they had the fortune of coming into contact with devotees, they were using their voices and hearing music in an appropriate way. And then also when you were talking about just the joys of Sankirtan, I was in a class recently with Rukmini Devi Dasi, and she was saying how it's also an obligation for us to chant because we are counteracting all this craziness that comes through the internet and all this negativity in the news when we chant, because we're bringing Krishna consciousness and Krishna himself into the world when we chant. So yeah, it's about our own advancement, but it's also about so much more than that. So thank you so much. This was just an amazing, wonderful class. I'm smiling. And thank you very, very much. And also, yeah, please feel better. I mean, I know it may be temporary and there's going to be more misery, but I hope you're back improved soon. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji. Yes, you make such a wonderful point. And it can be a serious part of our japa meditation, that I'm not just chanting japa for myself. It's not just about me and me going back home, back to Godhead. But by chanting the holy names, by chanting Krishna's names in love, it has an effect on the whole universe. And it might be a little imperceptible to us, but it is true. His divine grace through the Prabhupada started by just chanting very carefully in the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, making his plans to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. But from that intensive japa meditation, it did actually manifest. So similarly, we should chant japa, not just thinking, I need to become a pure devotee and go back home, back to Godhead, but also chant japa thinking, I can have some positive influence on others around me, other devotees and non-devotees. So our japa should be Sankirtan as well. It's not like there's Sankirtana and then there's everything else. Everything is supposed to be Sankirtana, especially in this Kali Yuga. That's the Dharma. As it's said in the later part of Bhagavatam, the 11th canto, about Lord Chaitanya. Prema Kishore, help me out. What is that verse again? About wow, I can't remember it now. Anyway, everything is supposed to be about Sankirtan. Everything is related to Sankirtana. Even our japa, we should be chanting japa in the mood thinking, let me somehow benefit other people. If I can be Krishna conscious, then I can spread that to other people as well. So thank you for reminding us of that attitude. Leela Kishore Mataji. All right, I guess we should finish here because my brain is not working to remember shlokas, which means that's like that hook, that pulls you off the stage. You're done. Get out of here. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Let me turn this off. Oh, here we go. No, I'm back. I remembered the verse. Yagyai Sankirtana Prayaya Yajanti Sumeda Saha, right? That intelligent people in the age of Kali, they worship Lord Chaitanya, and he does this Sankirtana. And it's interesting that he says Sankirtana Prayaya. Prayaya means like pretty much just something, which is unusual in the Sanskrit, because most of the sages, the great devotees, they speak very explicitly and very clearly when they make a point about something. And like Srila Prabhupada, there's never compromise, there's never like maybe, kind of, sort of. But in this verse, Yagyai Sankirtana Prayaya, it means pretty much just Sankirtan is the Dharma for the Kali Yuga. But what does that mean? It means that everything is meant to support the Sankirtana. Everything is meant to be connected to Sankirtana. When we worship the deity, we're meant to beautify the deity in such a way that people will come and hear about Krishna and want to chant his holy names. When we do any of our work, it's meant to support the Sankirtana. Sankirtana Prayaya means everything must be connected to the Sankirtana. It's not that there's something else that we're doing in Kali Yuga. Everything has the purpose of spreading the glory of Lord Krishna all over the universe. And that's what that means. Yagyaya Sankirtana Prayaya Yajanti Sumeda Saha. But we have to have Sumeda Saha, good intelligence, to really apply that. Maybe that's the part that we're working on. All right. Now I'm really done. Thank you, Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.